Hey guys, Parfax here. Today I'm bringing you another New World video. Now, I know I've been gone. I didn't post anything last week. I was on vacation if you didn't know. But we're going to bring you another New World video about the weapon system. Now, mainly we're going to be focusing on the weapons that need nerfs, but we're going to talk a little bit about how to buff some of the weapons as well. All right, let's get started. So, when talking about New World and New World weapons, there's obviously a few different tiers of weapons. Now, this isn't to say that if you want to use any weapon, you can actually be good at it. In this game, at least none of the weapons are completely unusable. There are a few games out there that there's just weapons you absolutely cannot use, but in this game, that's not the case. You can actually make a case for pretty much every weapon, which is a very good base starting area for a weapon system and balance in New World. But, of course, there's some weapons that are hard, on the top tier list. First, I want to just talk that I hope they don't necessarily nerf anything. There's probably 2 weapons / 3 that could really use a nerf, but I really hope they buff some of the lower ones up. The 3 specifically that need a nerf, it's actually more of mechanically, I think they need a nerf, not necessarily damage or power, but we'll talk about those in a second. But when it comes to some of the lower weapons, especially like the 2 ranged weapons, I think the range would actually be fine if you just opened up the hitboxes a little bit. I love the bow. It's probably my favorite weapon. The musket, they're just not quite as good as most of the other weapons. I know people are going to argue with me. People love the bow, love the bow, love the bow. The bow is great, but with the hitboxes, any bit of latency, it just makes the bow a lot harder to use. Some people use it very well. There's some people that use really crappy weapons well in every single game, or, classes really well in every single game. And I think the bow just needs a little bit of a buff as well with the musket especially. But I think actually if you maybe make the hitboxes a little bit bigger, which would be really hard to do, I think it would actually be in a fairly decent spot. The bow probably needs to get a little bit more damage, in my opinion. In the musket, I don't know as much about the musket. I just know from what people tell me, the musket's okay and can do a lot of damage. The problem was, during the alpha, the musket was incredibly insane. It was like the axe, but as a range, and it would, 1 or 2 shot you. It was pretty, it's 1 shot, not quite, but I mean, it would deal such a significant amount of damage. They kind of nerfed the weapon a little bit, in my opinion, but I think if they gave it a few buffs, and I think if you made the hitboxes just a tiny bit bigger it's not even to be like, oh, Parfax, you don't want to aim. No, it's really just accounting for latency. The game, you can move pretty fast. You can juke back and forth. And with latency, it's sometimes hard to tell exactly where they are on the screen. So all I want them to do is maybe give the hitboxes a little bit bigger to account for that. And that's really what they need, in my opinion. They're still pretty decent weapons. Like I said, you can use all these weapons really well, but it's pretty good. Now, another weapon is the Rapier. Now, the Rapier does have a really good tree. The evade tree is really good. The Rapier is a good secondary weapon. Now, people have, I've seen people argue about, oh, the Rapier is so good, it's so utility. Well, it's utility for 1v1s because it'll allow you to, do your riposte. It'll allow you to evade. It's a pretty good secondary weapon, but it's not a very good not one-handed weapon. It's not a very good main hand weapon. What I would like to see them is just to buff the other side of the tree. I'd be okay with them leaving the evade side of the tree as is. I want to see them buff the other side of the tree, the bleed damage. Maybe make it really pop. Give it some more damage. Give it something other than, just a little bit of damage, because everybody takes the other side of the tree, because the other side of the tree is actually perfectly fine. It's actually really, really good, but the damage side of the tree sucks. So either make it a really good PvE weapon, which is okay at PvE. It does pretty good at PvE, but for PvP, that side of the tree just kind of sucks, to be completely honest. So now let's talk about the weapons that need a nerf, or how I think they should balance them. First, we'll kind of go over the weapons that I'm going to put in this tier list, and then we'll talk about it in depth on each weapon. So first, putting, in the OP quote-unquote tier list, we're going to have the Great Axe, we're going to have the Life Staff, the Ice Gauntlet, and the Hatchet. Now, the Fire Staff is really good. I would like to see them kind of tweak a few of the abilities to give it a little bit more I don't say utility, but maybe a little bit damage. But realistically, the fire staff's in a fine spot. It's a really good siege weapon. It's an okay 1v1 weapon. I know people are like, oh, the 1v1 for the fire or the fire staff is great. Well, it's okay. The fire staff, the thing about the fire staff and the light staff that actually make it better as a ranged weapon than the musket and the bow is it seems because the projectiles are larger. First off, the bow shoots too slow. So you have to, account for all that, which is one thing the bow has going against it. But the life staff and the fire staff seem like their projectiles are bigger, so the hitboxes are a tad bigger. So maybe give the bow and the musket the hitbox of the life staff, fire staff. Now, it may be just a visual thing and maybe not, because the bullets are, or I should say the magical projectiles are actually just faster than the bow. It's actually pretty easy to land shots on the fire staff and life staff. Maybe making the hitboxes a little bit bigger would, determine that those two weapons are even easier to hit, which obviously if you just think about it, that it would make them easier to hit. So maybe just make the hitboxes for the bow and the musket a little bit bigger instead of making the players' hitboxes bigger. I don't know if you guys know anything about it, but essentially when a game develops their hitboxes, they can do it in multiple different ways. But essentially, if you take out all of the GUI, which is essentially just everything that you see on your characters, you take away the whole interface and you basically just strip it back. Now, GUI is not necessarily the correct term because GUI would just be the entire interface. But if you just strip back the first layer, it's essentially like squares, circles, and I think most of them deal with circles. And that's what your character is. It's just essentially a bunch of little circles running around, and that determines what your hitboxes is. Now, I don't know exactly. I've never actually coded and developed the game when it comes to that, so I don't exactly know how hard it is to tweak it, especially when it comes to projectiles versus the actual player. So, yeah, I mean, I know that's kind of like a little tangent on how, the hitboxes are actually, like, developed, how they actually work on the game side, but the fire staff and the life staff are fairly easy to hit, where the bow and the musket are a little bit harder. The musket's definitely easier than the bow, but I would like to see something change there. So I think the fire staff is probably in a fine spot. I don't imagine they'll actually touch it. It's in a pretty good spot for 1v1s if you're good enough with it. It's still a lower tier 1v1 weapon in my opinion, but it's definitely a higher tier siege weapon, so I think it's in a fine spot. So now let's talk about the weapons that need nerfed. Now, notice I don't have the Warhammer in here. The Warhammer is fine. It's a great siege weapon. It's not a great 1v1 weapon just because it's really slow. Any very skilled player can actually get away from the Warhammer. I know the Warhammer was pretty meta, but the Warhammer is actually not terribly hard to actually get away from. Once they get on you, it can be a little bit devastating. They can kind of chain some CC together, but it's a fine weapon. So let's first talk about the Great Axe. I think this is the easiest one to fix. The Great Axe, what does it have? So the Great Axe has movement skills, it has great damage, it has good CC, and it allows you to have easy grit as well. If you don't know what grit is, essentially allows you to avoid some CCs. So the Great Axe, it has a bug double damaging with its heavy attacks. If they fix that, I think the Great Axe is absolutely fine. It's going to nerf its damage by a decent amount, which is unfortunate, but I think, it being on the top tier and just having a bug, so it's not really a nerf, it's really a bug fix, which people are going to feel it's a nerf because it technically is, because you're not getting that extra damage. But I think if they do that, I think the Great Axe will be just fine. It'll still be a top tier weapon. It'll still be very highly used, but it won't be completely broken like it is now. So next, we're going to talk about the Ice Gauntlet. The Ice Gauntlet just has a little bit too much utility and a lot of damage. I would like to see maybe its slow reduced a little bit. For some people, now I didn't actually see this, but I heard there's like a bug with the slow, basically making it to where you crawl. If that's the case, they need to fix that. So I would like to see them either lower its damage a little bit or lower its slow a little bit. One of the two. I think that would put the Ice Gauntlet in a very good spot and still a very S tier weapon. Next, the Hatchet. The Hatchet, the only thing wrong with the Hatchet is its Berserk. Now, the Berserk is essentially the Hatchet. Here's what I want them to do. I want them to buff the throwing side of the Hatchet. Like, Parfax, what are you doing? No, look, hold on. I want them to buff the throwing side of the Hatchet. And I want them to make that the Berserk, when you have your undead passive, I think that's what it's called, I want it to last maybe 1 or 1.5 seconds. Use it as a, you know, a split second invulnerability and not a 3-second undeath. So it'll take down the utility of the Berserk a little bit, but I want to add power into the other side of the weapon, kind of keeping the Hatchet really top tier, but kind of shifting the power a little bit from the just straight Berserk passive, which is what everybody uses the Hatchet for. Give it a little bit less utility, but put it a little bit more into the throwing side of it, because people really don't use the throwing side of it almost at all. And I want to see the sides of the all these weapons that people don't use, I want to see them put power into those and shift power away from some of these, you know, other sides. Like the Ice Gauntlet, you know, everybody uses, you know, Ice Tomb, Ice Storm, and the Slow. They use the CC. We'll give maybe power a little bit to the auto-attacking turret. Give power to maybe like the Ice Wall, because the Ice Wall is actually pretty fine, the one that you throw down. Maybe shift some of its power to there instead of actually just straight nerfing it. So make the Gauntlet a little bit more well-rounded. Same with the Hatchet. Make Berserk a little bit less, you know, oppressive, and put it a little bit more into the throwing side. So we're kind of just shifting the power a little bit. Make builds a little bit more diverse instead of just having the same build essentially over and over again. Then Life Staff. Life Staff is a hard one, because Life Staff is incredibly meta. Obviously, it's the only healing weapon in the game, but it's incredibly good. I have a fix for the Life Staff, and I don't think people are going to like it, but I would take out the gem, allowing people to convert any of their weapons to make their main damage type focus. And the reason for that is I don't want to really nerf the Life Staff's healing that much, because being that it's the only healing weapon, there's no way other than that to really get healing from the game. You need to have it in the game and be very powerful, because if healing sucks, then PvE sucks, PvP sucks in like large scale or any even small scale group play. So it's really hard to nerf the Life Staff until we have multiple type of healing weapons in the game. I know that originally there was a healing Gauntlet, but I think they just took out the Gauntlet, swapped it out for the Ice Gauntlet, and then made that Gauntlet the Life Staff. I'd like to see a couple other healing weapons in the game, maybe like a healing book. I don't know, a healing scythe, or I don't know, scythe's not really a healing weapon, but give us a couple other healing weapons in the game. Now that's going to come down the road. Once you do that, you can really start nerfing it, because then you have other options. Maybe have like one better PvP healer, one PvE healer, but I think having the ability to make any of our weapons scale off of focus is extremely dangerous, because that makes it so that you can spec full into healing and still do really good damage. So I think that is how I would nerf the Life Staff. Other than that, I think the weapons are overall pretty good spot in the game. Like I said, I think the bow is the worst. Now I've dueled bows, they've beat me. I've beat people with bows. I don't think the bow's necessarily power isn't a bad spot. I just think latency has a huge issue with a bow, and the projectiles are a lot slower, so it's a harder to hit. And they have obviously an arc, so you have to not only account for they have a small hitbox, they have a, you know, slow projectile time, and the projectiles have, what do you call it, you have to account for the projectile's distance. So they have like bullet drop is what we call it for, you know, like when we're shooting real weapons and stuff like that, but it's arrow drop. So they have all that, which makes it kind of in a weird spot. The Rapier, I want to see them buff the other side. I think the Warhammer is completely fine where it's at. It's just got its little, it's just great. The Spear is pretty cool. I actually like most of it. I would maybe like to see them put a little bit more power into the damage side of the Spear. You know, keep the CC side of the Spear the same. Maybe make it to where we can run builds where it's 2 CC and 1 damage, because 1 damage is pretty good. So I want to see maybe that. The Sword and Shield is overall pretty good. I haven't used that in a while, so let me know in the comment section down below what you think of the Sword and Shield. Maybe there's one side that people are using over another to really buff it. You know, I know like Musket, they're using like powder burn and stuff like that. Penetrating arrow and stuff like that for the bow, they're all using. But the thing about the bow is if the bow's hitbox was a little bit better, maybe the bullet speed was a little bit faster, the bow actually has a pretty good set of build paths you can do. The one thing I'd like to see is evasive shot. I want to have it push you back a little bit faster and farther. I'd like to see that a little bit. Because evasive shot, I've seen people use it. Honestly, it's pretty garbage. You'd much just rather have insert any other ability, because you can dodge backwards about the same speed, actually faster, then you can actually use that evasive shot, and it kind of actually puts you in this really weird animation. I want to see it be faster, move back farther. So yeah, so I don't really want to nerf that many weapons. Like I said, you know, I'm not really much of a nerf guy, but the problem is if you have a weapon that's OP and then you bring everything up to that OP, maybe they balance the game around the weapons that aren't quite OP. So you really do have to nerf weapons. I know nerfing weapons is an extremely unpopular opinion in MMOs, but I would like to see them, you know, fix a few bugs, make a couple adjustments to weapons. The only weapon I think here needs a straight nerf is 2. That's the battle axe, the life staff, and those are going to be take the damage away from the battle axe, make it to where you can't scale. Focus is a stat, and the other ones we're just shifting power. We're shifting power from the Ice Gauntlet and the Hatchet, and we're moving it into their unused trees. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. We are going to have a ton of New World stuff coming out. So if you are interested in New World at all, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel. We're having a bunch of things going to come out. We're going to start hitting the Twitch, you know, we're going to start hitting it back up here, you know, pretty soon. We're going to be doing some random stuff until New World launches, but once New World launches, we are going absolutely ham. There's actually some big stuff coming down the pipeline for the channel, for YouTube, for Twitch, all that good stuff. All right, guys, thanks for watching. This is longer than, you know, I was supposed to have it, but, you know, that's the way it is with all my videos. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll talk to you soon.